There we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Leach with Ballard Power Systems. I'm sure I've engaged with many of you on the call today. I'm North American Market Development for Ballard Power Systems East. I'm here with a great panel lineup today of really highly skilled people in the industry that are going to contribute to our webinar today on fueling and permitting. We expect it to take about 45 minutes. We ask those that have any questions to please put them in the Q&A. If they're more complex questions, we kindly ask that you reach out to the panelists directly and ask them the question. They'll respond accordingly. If they don't have information readily available today, that we will respond to you. We will be sharing the webinar with everybody that is registered today. And there will also be a registration link up and coming for our third series, which will be offered again on March 29th, 2023 on government funding for your transit fleet. I'll be one of those panelists along with a couple other people here today. And we look forward to that third webinar series. We've had great response. The last webinar series had over 200. So it's really exciting to see where the industry is moving. I'm going to move forward here. If there's any questions, again, please just enter them into the question and answer and make sure that you're on mute. So today we've got 5 great panelists. We've got Sydney Krueger, president of Krueger KTC Consulting. She's going to bring to us the hydrogen fuel on buses and the depot info presentation, and Tim, Market Development Director for Ballard, is going to talk about hydrogen safety and sustainability. And if you've been in the industry, you probably know Tim. He's been with Ballard. He's a lifer at Ballard, over 20-some years of technology experience that you're going to gain here today with Tim. And Hernan is Vice President of Sales with BayoTech, and he's going to talk about the first deployments in gaseous hydrogen options. And Stacy Brower, Business Development Director with Linde, and talk about the liquid hydrogen and fleet deployment at scale. And last but not least is Nick. And Nick's going to be is the Executive Director of the Center of Hydrogen Safety, which I think is front of mind for everybody. And questions are coming forward daily on the safety around hydrogen. So it's a real pleasure to have him here. And he's going to be talking about ensuring successful station builds. So just a couple of housekeeping items. Again, questions in the Q&A, and to all the female participants and everybody else on the call today, happy International Women's Day. I'm proud to be playing in the renewable energy sector and specifically leading charge in the hydrogen sector. And to those 2 female panelists here today, Stacy and Sydney, congratulations on the contributions that you're making to today's industry changes and the race towards climate change. So I'm just going to advance the slide, and I'm going to introduce Sydney again, or myself, sorry, I'm going to talk about myself. I'm Kim Leach, again, North American Market Development Manager. I'm always available. Reach out to me to talk about new fleet deployments. If you want to learn more about Ballard, I'm the person that you'd reach out to for the Eastern market, and Tim on the Western coast. So who is Ballard? Ballard, we're 44 years of industry experience. We are the leader in fuel cell technology in North America and globally. We've expanded. We've done a massive recruitment over the last couple of years. We now have over 1,100 employees working globally and continuing to expand our talent showcase. Over 1,400 patents and applications are owned by Ballard Power Systems. We're a publicly listed company. We have a very strong new carbon neutrality commitment by 2030. With that, globally, we had the success of deploying over 1,400 buses with primary stakeholders, obviously in Asia, Europe, and North America, and most recently, 2 really successful projects in cold weather applications in Edmonton, Alberta, and Strathcona County. 2,300 trucks on the road powered by Ballard fuel cells, 7 train in developments, 8 ships. That's a really strong upcoming market for Ballard Power Systems, and 8 megawatts of stationary power products. We don't mess around. We've got over 1 gigawatt of fuel cell power products delivered to date with 175 million miles, and that continues to add up as more deployments are being scaled up on a daily basis. We have 4 production sites, and the newest one we're proud to announce is going to be in Bend, Oregon, launching in Q3 of 2023. So made in America, everybody. So Ballard's part of the landscape in North America with a stronghold in the United States. So I'm going to move forward here. I want to introduce Sydney. Sydney is our sales representative for Ballard Power Systems. She's president of Krueger Transit Consulting. She brings a wealth of knowledge and interest to the industry. And her vision in hydrogen industry and expertise in hydrogen project management brings together a holistic project to her clients. And when I asked her, what are you striving towards to mitigate the barriers in hydrogen deployment? And she said it's standardization and fueling systems to make adoption easier. Reach out to Sydney. She knows a lot about the industry, well-connected, a strong family history. So Sydney, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you so much, everyone. Excited to be here and excited to be educating the market about hydrogen applications. Wanted to start here going over both the tank modules and fueling on the bus. So fueling on the bus is done through the H35 port, which is 5,000 PSI. Here, the dispenser will communicate with the bus with the goal of achieving fast fills at smart stations where fueling is maintained at both the right pressure and the right temperature to achieve 6 to 12-minute fills, which we know for operations is instrumental to transit and what really makes hydrogen stand apart from battery deployments. In terms of the tank modules, so they have 95% usable capacity, each holds 7.5 kilograms of hydrogen, and a 40-foot New Flyer hydrogen fuel cell bus will have 5 of these, or a total of 37.5 kilograms on the roof, stored at 350 bar. I think what's so interesting about this is equivalent to 640 kilowatt hours of power on a 40-foot bus with just one battery pack that's 140 kilowatt hours. This makes it a powerhouse of energy without the weight of batteries. The tanks have a 20-year service life and are the same Type 4 tanks that many on this call probably have experience with in terms of CNG buses. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go through a little bit about safety. I think this is instrumental when we're talking about new technology. So the bus has several levels of security to make sure that the bus stays safe. So in terms of a thermal event, all high voltage is shut off, all flow is shut off in the hydrogen system, the fans are turned off, and the fuel cell is shut down and alarm sound. In terms of thermal pressure release devices, we have temperature and pressure check valves that vent to dedicated flow lines and then to the atmosphere. If an impact is detected, all flow from the tank is shut off immediately. Also on board are Kidde Fire Suppression's dual spectrum fire sensors, which detect not only flame, but also leaks on the bus. Next slide, please. So talking a little bit about infrastructure, in general, this is a lot of the questions that we get. You know, we have the bus, but how do we fuel it? What we're in the webinar today, we're lucky to have 2 fuel providers on from Linde and BayoTech who are going to go into more details here. But just to give you a little overview, your 2 options are A, trucking it in liquid or gas form, or B, producing on site. When we look at option A, we're seeing pilot projects are using more and more frequently mobile fuelers in either liquid or gas form that come and can fill anywhere from 2 to 10 buses. We've recently seen that mobile fuelers are able to handle more buses than in the past. In the past, it was really at that 2 mark, and now they've scaled up to 10 or maybe to 12. What we've seen in terms of delivery, that many long established projects in the United States for transit use liquid as a delivery source. And we think the answer hands down for transit and for scaling is liquid. When we look at on-site production, Santa Clarita is a famous transit agency that is going to deploy their first SMR. Sunline has had one in place for years. And then we also look at on-site production via electrolysis, and Champaign-Urbana and Sunline are 2 agencies that are famous for putting that infrastructure in place. In terms of SMR, you do need access to natural gas pipeline. We do see that being the lowest price per kilogram in terms of operations of how to achieve hydrogen as a molecule. Electrolysis, we like to see power rates for less than 5 cents a kilowatt hour. When you're deciding among these different options of how you're going to bring on hydrogen supply, we want to remind you to look at proximity to hydrogen production sites. Tim's going to go over later where major hydrogen liquefaction plants exist in the United States and where this hydrogen hub project with these new 8 to 10 projects will be located. It's important to look at station footprint, site constraints, and then also to look at CapEx as well as OpEx. Next slide, please. I think these charts are really, really interesting. What we have on the y-axis is cost and on the x-axis is fleet size. And what we know for a fact is that battery does not scale well. It's easy to do a battery project for 3 to 5 buses, but once you scale to 50 or 100 battery buses, what you're seeing here is that you have the need for massive new power supply. So that includes construction of major new infrastructure, which is invasive, expensive, and a multi-year process. And we all know from dealing with utilities, it is not as easy to do as you might think. So as you're starting with a battery project and a fuel cell project here, you can look at fuel cell at the top here. It's more expensive than battery at a small fleet size. You might just bring on a couple battery charges, whereas you'll probably start deploying a fuel cell infrastructure that is probably at the 30 bus point, unless you're bringing on a mobile fueler, which BayoTech also has. As you scale up, as we look up here in battery infrastructure, you might need to add a transformer. You might need to do feeder upgrades. You might need to do substation upgrades. So as you scale up in battery size of fleet, it becomes more complex. If we look at this other chart here to the right, we see that with fuel cell infrastructure, as you scale up and fleet size increases, the amount of infrastructure that you're adding decreases. So we see that really once you get to a large size hydrogen fleet, you're really just adding more storage and more dispensers. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking at infrastructure costs per bus, this has been a really instrumental analysis that we've done over the last 3 years. We know that hydrogen, hands down, is the answer at scale, and these numbers prove this. If we I highlight a couple of these agencies here, Foothill is famous for doing a study and discovering that a 300 bus fleet at full fleet deployment, infrastructure for battery was going to cost them $125 million. We compared this to hydrogen infrastructure at full fleet at $25 million. That was $100 million savings for Foothill to go hydrogen at scale. And you see this here when you look at fuel cell infrastructure at $133,000 versus battery infrastructure at $322,000 per bus. Another metric to look at here is AC Transit. AC Transit was told that for 178 battery buses, infrastructure would cost them $152 million, whereas for 3 times that many buses, it would cost them $120 million for hydrogen. So when we look at those numbers there, it's 6 times more expensive for them to deploy battery buses at that size versus fuel cell. And that is why AC Transit has made the decision to switch their rollout plan from 30% battery and from 70% battery and 30% fuel cell to 70% fuel cell and 30% battery because of the savings and operational benefits. Next slide, please. That is it for me.
All right, thank you very much, Sydney. That was very informative. And please address your questions directly to Sydney if you have any questions, or reach out to her afterwards. Her contact will be at the end of the presentation. So thanks again, Sydney, and happy Women's Day. Tim is a market development director for Ballard Power Systems. Tim brings over 20 years of history in working with Ballard and has strategically developed his career to support government policy from renewable energy to engineering thresholds of heavy-duty zero-emission applications and end-use deployments to help contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the competitive race to address climate change. So Tim, it's all yours. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, Kim. Very much a pleasure to be here. Happy to be talking about hydrogen and this front line of zero-emission bus transition, the zero-emission transition that transit is right at the forefront of. And that front line is defined by the electrical grid. most of the United States, most people in the United States now live in places where there are carbon mandates. In fact, there's 23 states, and that list is growing, that have adopted decarbonization mandates, and 17 that are following California's mandates for fleet regulations. What this means is a tremendous change in the way we deliver energy that's really going to be reliant on the grid quite heavily as different sectors electrify. They're going to require triple or quadruple the new renewable resources to feed this in a decarbonized way. And electrifying transport alone would require doubling what we have on the grid today. That's daunting. In fact, it's already starting to show up now. Gridlock has arrived. There are interconnection queues that are backing up. If we could put in all of the renewables now that are in the interconnection queue, we'd hit our goals that we've set for 2035, but they're waiting. In fact, last year, 20% of the planned utility scale solar projects were delayed in the first half. And less than the quarter of what's in the interconnection queue now is expected to make it through. We've got to more than double the growth rate for transmission just to meet these early stage electrification goals. And hydrogen is here to help. It's really here to help make that grid a reality, because we can't afford the externalities. Adaptation is already a requirement that we've got to look at. It's known that the California wildfires are an externality that have been affected by rapid electrification, and the wildfires in 2019 wiped out everything we gained in EVs up to that point. It's a very real danger that we have to pay a lot of attention to, which means how we distribute energy becomes very, very important. Texas has suffered through this as well, as they deal with extreme weather events and asking customers to back off on their usage, which becomes more and more difficult as we become reliant on electricity. Again, hydrogen is here to help. The first thing that most proponents of hydrogen say is that it's a zero carbon fuel, but the detractors say, isn't most hydrogen actually from fossil fuels? Well, today that's true. But the most of the hydrogen, if not all the transportation hydrogen, comes from zero carbon or low carbon sources. And that's just a small fraction of the total hydrogen in use today. In fact, that's a huge opportunity, because that's a lot of carbon that we can take out of the system by replacing that hydrogen with zero carbon hydrogen. That's been recognized by the federal government, and that effort's underway, which is good news for those of us who want to use it in transportation. That drives down costs. We have to remember that if we want zero emissions, even going to the grid isn't always a guarantee. The grid also has to do this decarbonization effort. In the West, there's a lot of great news about renewable resources, but other regions working on new sources for their grid. It's the same story with hydrogen as it is with electricity. It depends on your starting resource. You could start with wind and solar, put it on the grid and charge your battery, or you could put it in through an electrolyzer and fill up your fuel cell electric vehicle. Same zero carbon source. You can start with renewable natural gas, biogenic methane as they call it, put it in a thermal power plant, charge your EV, or put it in a steam methane reformer, get hydrogen, charge your fuel cell electric vehicle. The carbon content depends on that source. Once you're an electron or a molecule, the carbon's gone. And it's important to remember that as you strategize. This isn't a VHS versus Betamax kind of argument. This is a complementary argument. As we've seen with solar power and wind power, they serve where others are weak. Batteries and fuel cells do the same thing. You know, if you choose between diesel and gasoline today, in the future, you may choose between hydrogen and the grid for the same sort of applications. Hydrogen's out there. It's already out there. This is pre-Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, pre-Inflation Reduction Act. These are deployments that are out there largely from warehouses and industrial applications that need both gaseous and liquid, shown there in green. We'll hear a little more about that from Linde later on, but hydrogen's out there and it's propagating very quickly. It's going to happen even faster now with the federal incentives that are coming across. Incentives for hydrogen up to $3 a kilogram, bringing that down to the kind of cost that they're looking for in California, which will set the bar elsewhere. Hydrogen hubs across the country, billions and billions of dollars in projected projects. Some of those will win and some of those will turn into privately funded projects, but hydrogen is coming and it's decarbonizing and it's getting cheaper. Really excited among all the players that are out there now, and the list is growing, to have two of the strongest to help present today to help you learn more about the fuel. We'll hear from BayoTech and we'll hear from Linde, and really happy to have those guests on and to tell you about all the things that hydrogen is going to do to help us decarbonize. with that, I'll hand it over
Wow,
to
thank
Renan.
you, Tim. That's excellent. Thank you so much. Next, like Tim just mentioned, is BayoTech, and they're going to talk about their first deployments in gaseous hydrogen options. Today, we have Hernan here, who is the Vice President of Sales, and he's experienced in the commercialization of hydrogen and compressed natural gases and electric vehicle platforms. He's here today to share the scalable hydrogen transport and direct fueling solutions to get fuel cell electric buses deployed quickly and affordably. Take it away, Hernan.
All right, next slide, please. So
There you
just
go.
a little bit, take pause, appreciate the backdrop for these next several presenters at the end of this panel. I think it's important to understand, we're talking about something that years ago we wouldn't have talked about the deployment as it is today, but as we look at deployment, what we look at BayoTech is a distribution network. And this slide kind of emphasizes kind of our ecosystem. Our goal is, as a company, to have north of 60 of these hubs throughout the US distributed in a way where we have customers access to this gaseous hydrogen. That is our goal. And it's all really developed beginning there on this slide, that bottom left corner, it's our hub, that's our H2 production. Because depending on the size of your fleet, and we'll talk about that in a few of the slides, depending on the size, you may want to bring this in-house. People are always talking about, hey, how do I drive up somewhere and use a fuel? Well, how about if we bring this behind the fence? And if you take heed to what a lot of the major companies, fleet companies today in the North American market, actually globally, the ones that are real into this business need to have access to the fuel. And it began with the CNG world, and now as we keep that same model, we're seeing that having the presence of that molecule available to these applications, because I think we all agree that these applications are out there, and how do we fuel them? So this is the beginning of our scope of work. There at the bottom left, we have these hubs. Our IP is involved in the generation of these. We have a hub unit with a bayonet technology that gives us the efficiency to increase the level of these sites. Our first site is in Wentzville, Missouri. Look forward to seeing everybody there as we kick that off. That site will be deploying or generating 600 kilograms of hydrogen per day. And then once we're up to these sites, each site will be doing about 1,700 kilograms a day. And eventually it's a matter of just adding additional hubs so we can easily scale that up immediately. So that's the beginning of it. Then we go into the next part, which is the compression and the actual storage part of it. And once the gas is released, we compress it, and we have the technology that houses it ready for deployment as you go into the H2 storage, which are actually the trailers. And that's kind of what you see in the background. Beginning here with this little one is my CNG one, and then all the way to the larger one here, which are our hydrogen ones. And when we have that, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts you need. Then from there, well, how do I fuel? Do I go to attach to an island that eventually a vehicle can go to a POS system, or is there a crude way of creating the dispensing of a vehicle? We have both scenarios, and that's kind of, we have both of these trailers here shown, and we'll show some other ones. And at the end of the day, all the applications there on the bottom right, we have trucks, buses, forklifts, drones, and so forth. But I would concur with what the panelists said. The transit agencies are very much looking at this hydrogen piece, and we're looking forward to be a part of that. Next slide, please. Specifically, how has it been done? How does BayoTech kind of fall into the transit solutions? Well, there's three methods. Number one, our pilot programs. We've seen that there are times that a transit agency will just want to test the technology out, and it's a pilot, and depending on how that goes, that opens up other avenues. So there's a way that we can be used as a service to provide that for you in small levels, like we see here in this small little trailer that can be moved without having without the use of a tractor, but it's a pickup truck, right? A 3-ton to a ton pickup truck that can actually move that module. And that's what we've seen in these smaller pilot programs, is just the accessibility. There may not be a footprint to bring fueling. So having something small, ease of use has helped us. That's one way. Then we have demonstration fleets. Now it's scaling up a little bit larger. And we would graduate kind of into a larger trailer that can give us north of 700 kilograms of hydrogen should it be necessary. And at that time, we can have some type of service that continually, fuels, refuels, dispenses, fuel dispenses, and we can create a nice little ecosystem to make sure that your fleet is up and going. And then the last piece, which is the most exciting piece, is, after you have deployment of these buses and or vehicles, you may say, you know what, this makes sense. The economies are there. Their subsidies are helping us. We can do a full fleet conversion. That really addresses how we do this. And if we go to the next slide, I could show you how we do this in 3 scenarios. There we have, on the left side, we have, if anybody is looking at just less than 10 buses, we have a small unit there, beginning with a pickup truck that can be connected to a trailer that in itself can go to an application where you have just a hose dispenser. It's one at a time. Or we can go from that to a storage or compression site that gives us some type of dispensing opportunity, a POS system, and that you can have multiple at a time. Or last but not least is really the on-site production. And I think this is what's really going to start moving the needle once we start seeing the applications and people seeing how reducing the carbon intensity and bringing this on site really allows you to control the destiny of where you are with your fleet. I mean, it's all started with diesel, right? Diesel, you have wet fueling that can be done. People come on site and fuel you. With CNG, people have the molecule and own the molecule because they have access to it because they partnered with people such as US Gain or Clean Energy and people of that nature. And now when it comes to hydrogen, the model is going to continue. And here for fleets that really want to maximize it with 10 plus buses, that's when we can help there generating a gaseous hydrogen on site, and then it can go into that continued ecosystem where we compress and we store. That goes in dispensing, and then it concludes there by going into the actual bus itself. Now, this is real cool stuff, but is there an application, and do we have a customer that we can say this actually works for? Next slide, please. And yes, we do. So we did a customer case study, and this is a situation that happened where the transit buses, they were on order, and it looked like the infrastructure was going to take longer. So what was BayoTech able to do? Number one, we were able to, first of all, deliver hydrogen, as you see there in that picture there to the right of the actual slide. We deployed one of our units, and there we have a simple panel with simple hosing that goes into the transit vehicle itself. And it did, one at a time, because this was just a small test fleet, a pilot fleet. But nonetheless, this kind of shows you that the technology is available, it's scalable. And if we ever want to, and for relationships like this, as they turn into really, needing more hydrogen, that's really when the hub that we will be introducing. Once again, our first site will be in Missouri, in Wentzville, Missouri, where we're looking to generate our first hydrogen molecule. And that is all I have.
Thank you very much, Hernan. That's wonderful. Stacy Growler, Business Development Director of Clean Energy, of Clean Hydrogen for Linde, is up next. She's the Director of Business Development, and her interest in the hydrogen industry and expertise is in production, distribution, storage of hydrogen, as well as small to large technical solutions for hydrogen refueling systems. Linde's vision for the future mobility is to leverage available incentives to lower the cost of hydrogen and create the necessary technology offerings and facilitate market entry from small demo scale to large scale use. And I encourage all our panelists to answer the questions that are coming in. We've had some great questions. We've got 8 to date, so 9 now. So great, everybody's listening and participating. So please, panelists, answer those questions if they relate to you. And Stacy, the stage is yours.
Great, thanks so much, Kim. Appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm enjoying this opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about, what Linde is doing to make more molecules available, increase our services, our technology offerings, to really keep the momentum in this space moving. So I spent a lot of time over the last few years listening to what the needs in the market are, all the different things that you need to consider when you're trying to figure out how do I use all these different things to meet the business objectives of my agency. So today I wanted to go over a couple of things that I think meld nicely with what Sydney and Tim and Hernan have just kind of walked you through. So Linde's hydrogen value chain. So we really play in all aspects of the space. We've been in business for, a very long time. The production, obviously very important, whether you want to do production on your site, whether you want it delivered, the distribution and storage. So there's a lot to consider. Do I want gas? Do I want liquid? And then of course, when I get it there, how am I going to get it into, my bus? So there's a lot of considerations, and, we've spent a lot of time developing systems and technologies to help you do just that. So next slide. I wanted to start just kind of reinforce what Tim said earlier about the supply of molecules in the US, because I know that's a very big concern when you're considering, do I go this way? Do I go that way? There's been a lot of concern. So what I wanted to show you was, so Linde has 5 liquefiers across the US. It really gives us a nice coast-to-coast coverage, if you will. Liquid you can transport at long distances still in an economical fashion. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. If we have, an issue at one plant, we have reliability from others. So we also, if you look at the little red squares, those are gas hydrogen compression stations. So we do troop trailers. There are a couple announcements. We obviously green hydrogen is the way we want to go. Not only to get to zero. Somebody made a comment in the chat. Negative is great, and I totally agree. But baby steps. So we announced our 35 megawatt electrolyzer in Niagara Falls, the first of many 5 megawatt additions to Ontario. Those are all underway, under construction. So we hope to have them coming to you soon. To increase the supply of those green molecules to the US. Fine. The other thing I wanted to just touch on real quick is, there are a lot of considerations when you're thinking about, okay, how many buses do I want to deploy? What's better for my agency? Should I go with gas? Should I go with liquid? And, it really comes down to, scale. Where do you see yourself starting? Where do you see yourself going to? So liquid, obviously, you can fit a lot more hydrogen molecules in a liquid tanker. So, and this is just an average tanker, if you can get, over 3,000 kilograms, how does that compare to a gas? So in gas, you're going to get probably like 3 to 4 times less. So you need a lot more gas molecules to get the same amount of product as you would get in one truckload of product. So just something to keep in mind, when you're thinking about it. The other thing about gas is, you lose economics as you move away from the plant. So gas makes a lot more sense economically when you are close to the source. And I would say, within 100 miles. Once you start to get outside that bubble, your cost goes up rapidly, which is why, for most people, liquid seems to make sense. So just perspective. Next slide, please. So technology solutions. So, Linde has a pretty wide variety of, small to large options, for whatever your fleet size may be. Today, I'd like to focus on the larger end of the scale. So when you start thinking, somewhere beyond, I'd call it 8 to 10 buses. When you start thinking about that larger scale where really getting liquid kind of dictates, economics are better, when you're using liquid. So we have a submersible cryopump technology that we typically deploy into our larger installations that has higher flow rates than, some of the gas options for the, smaller bridging type applications. So on the large scale, the cryopump can do, 100 kilograms an hour. We're working on, the next version of that with a higher throughput that we're expecting here in late 23. But right now, I think one of the best things about these are, so they're modular. So you don't have to start, with a huge system today. You can start with one module to feed your buses. And then if you decide 5 years down the road, hey, that worked really great, I want to add some more, but I don't want to go put in this whole new infrastructure. You just plop down, a new unit next to it. It has integrated cooling, so it's pretty compact. Really, it looks like a shipping container. And if you go to the next slide, Kim, I think maybe you can get a little bit better visual. So if you look on the left-hand side, you're going to see the base unit, and that's the typical unit. Now, this unit contains your submersible pump, your electronics, your buffer tubes, your heat exchangers, the cooling, everything is integrated into that one unit. So like I mentioned, it's modular, and basically you're just going to pair it with, a large liquid storage tank. You're going to have a little bit, receiver storage for buffer, for bank management, and that can easily be, you can accommodate growth pretty easily. Like I said, you can just add units. So, if you look on the right-hand side, so if you said, hey, I want a 4-ton-a-day station, what does it look like? It's really a matter of just adding those units incrementally. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can put them in a straight line. You can put them in an L. It'll allow you to accommodate really any type of available space you have. Not everybody has a perfect box to go put their system in. So it's very flexible in that respect. And with that, I appreciate your time today, and always happy to field any questions you may have. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you, Stacy. That's great information. And please feel free to reach out. Her contact will be available at the end of the session. And up next is Nick Barrow. He's the Executive Director for the Center of Hydrogen Safety. And I think that's front of mind. A lot of questions that I field on a daily basis are around hydrogen safety and the aspects related to it, and local permitting. And his goals are to provide a common communication platform with a global scope to ensure safety information, guidance, and expertise are available to all stakeholders and users. He's our final panelist today, so make sure you send the questions in and we'll get them answered. And they have a great website, so make sure you check out his website after, and it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Kim. All right, I'm going to jump right in. I'll be quick about most of this, trying to set the stage a little bit. I want to impress that all fuels contain energy and can pose a hazard if not handled properly. So here you see just some comparisons of hydrogen to gasoline, and things like no toxicity with hydrogen versus you have some with gasoline, sealed container at atmospheric pressure for gasoline, where you have a high pressure storage container. Certainly when you get down to things like leaks, that gasoline can leak out in the pool, wait to be either cleaned up or volatilize or catch fire, whereas hydrogen tries to move up and away and disperse very quickly. Hydrogen can cause embrittlement, or gasoline, that's not the case. So you can look at all these slides later, so I'm just going to move through them fast. Next slide. Some more comparison to other common fuels that we're familiar with. I think maybe the first one that might hit you a little bit there is that hydrogen's odorless versus natural gas having mercaptans and gasoline having benzene. So there is some work being done to odorize. There's some challenges with that as well. We're not there yet, but is some hopeful research being done. Hydrogen is about 3 times the energy content by weight, but about versus gasoline, but about 4 times less by volume. Thus the need for that high pressure storage. All right, next slide. So where are we at with safety? So we probably all on this call can understand that safety issues can be a deal breaker if we don't deal with those properly. We're really starting out with a good, stable foundation, though. We have about a century of hydrogen being used fairly safely. Good safety knowledge, best practices exist. However, its use as a fuel is new to many. They may lack the experience or expertise, and ultimately may not know what they don't know. The dangerous assumptions you see down there are ones that we've run into in a lot of our activities. We already know how to use hydrogen safely, or it's just like any other flammable gas. And then always we hear the one that's far too dangerous to use. Failing to address these knowledge gaps, we can have incidents and industry setbacks. Next slide. So some resources for hydrogen safety, and there's 3 of them I have on here, busy slide, but we have a hydrogen tools. It's an online information portal. It's a global portal. We're getting about 50,000 sessions a month. There are just some of the topics that are covered by that. We have a hydrogen safety panel. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second, and why that's important relative to this conversation. And then the Center for Hydrogen Safety, it's a global nonprofit, really allows a community to come together to collaborate and remove barriers, and certainly to increase knowledge. And I've provided some links for you on all those to go out and look at that further. Okay, next slide. So let me talk about the hydrogen safety panel and why this is important. The safety panel was formed in 2003 in support of the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office and the work they were doing. It was really meant to help identify issues, safety issues with projects, as well as industry gaps. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary, now have 22 members, expanding to 25 in the next few months. Almost 700 years now of experience. This group has been involved in more than 400 projects and more than 600 reviews, and really has seen the entire breadth from early R&D all the way up through demonstration and commercialization. Has really seen quite a few different types of applications as well. You can see it's non-regulatory, it's neutral. There are benefits. Some of those are reducing costs from over-engineering or delayed approvals, missing safety considerations. And that bottom right one really is really where we've seen some of the panel really shine, which is establishing stakeholder and public confidence. Next slide, please. So the reason this becomes so important relative to this type of an activity is that the panel, and thank you. The panel is been supporting the state of California now for about the last 8 years relative to the California Energy Commission, and it's expanded beyond CEC's projects now. We are supporting other transit authorities and other agencies in ensuring that safety is considered. Some of the activities that we get involved in are things like design and document reviews, hazard analysis review or participation, site reviews, certainly incident investigation as well. And I'll encourage you, if you're new to hydrogen or really want that over the shoulder look, that second step, that early design piece, is really the part that really comes into play. So having a group that really can come and stand next to you and to look those over and give you some feedback and help you consider what some of the safety issues may be, or even give you the confidence that you've done a pretty successful job of considering the safety aspects. So again, been used quite a bit in many of the projects in California, as well as many of those station deployments, and now moving much more so into medium and heavy duty as well. Next slide. I'm just going to go real quick on this. Lots of training courses available through the center, and training should be at the center of really what you're trying to get your staff and the workers to really engage in. Having a fundamental knowledge on the properties and safety aspects of hydrogen is going to be important. So feel free to look this over if you have questions later. But the middle column is free always for the first responders. That's an important group for success, especially of the transportation sector. The right are free the day of and are available to CHS members or as a pay for product. And the left side is some of our, well, there's one free course there, and the rest are at a very, very minimal fee, as well as a credential that's available. Okay, next slide. So I want you, as you're thinking about your project and what you're doing, I have these 3 questions for you. We must recognize that with the promise of hydrogen comes the responsibility of safety. So with that in mind, how will you ensure that hydrogen safety has demonstrated value in your project and activities? How will you identify and address hydrogen safety vulnerabilities? And how will you ensure that your staff are trained and equipped to identify and address those safety questions, concerns, and challenges? Happy to answer your questions and talk with you more offline if you so desire. And I think that might be my last slide. Yep, there we go.
Yes, it is. Wow. Thank you, Nick. That was great information. And I encourage everybody to reach out to all the panelists' websites and check out additional information on the Ballard fueling white paper that we're going to circulate shortly. It has a lot of permitting related issues, resources. There's 2 actually permitting guidebooks, one from the province of BC and one from California that you can use for reference. But again, thank you to all the panelists from BayoTech, Linde, the Hydrogen Safety Center, and KTC, who are experts in the industry. Thank you very, very much for participating. And 189 people on the call today, I think was at the highest. That's great response. So that shows the hype in the industry and the interest for hydrogen fuel cell deployments. Our session 3 is up and coming. That's going to be taking place on March 29th. And that's addressing funding for your transit fleet. So please register when that link comes available. We're going to circulate all the information that we had available today. We're all available to answer questions. I think we've answered most of them. I encourage some of the panelists to still respond if there's some open questions, but I did share my email there in the chat. So again, thank you everybody, and we're wrapping up to the hour, but is there any other comments from the panelists today?
Well, I would just like to
yes.
thank everyone for attending today. I think it was great that both BayoTech and Linde were on the call today. Big thanks to them. In a lot of ways in hydrogen right now, we're collaborating and competing. We're offering some similar and overlapping options, but I think as fleet owners, you really should be aware that it is an open and competitive marketplace. And I think that's really important for driving down costs and moving us quickly to the solutions that you need. That's something that hydrogen and fuel cells offer in zero emissions. And I think that's super valuable. And thanks again to all the panelists.
So thank you, everybody. And I'm going to hand it over to our management team here behind the scenes. And please, those questions are coming in. We will respond to you directly. Put your email in the chat there and we will respond. But again, thank you everybody for participating. And we look forward to the next session, webinar 3, the last in our series, called Government Funding for Your Transit Fleet. Please register when that link comes out. And again, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.